Welcome back. Federal government employees who are yet to complete their online data verifications stand the risk of having their names deleted from the payroll before the end of this year. That's according to the head of service of the Federation, Mrs. Winifred Oyoita. The head of service insists the federal government is firm in its decision to ensure that only workers with credible data are on the payroll of government. As of June this year, a total of 330,820 employees of the federal government had enrolled on the Integrated Personnel and Payroll Information System, IPIS, which is an online human resources module introduced in 2006 to help government block loopholes and discourage corruption in the administration of personnel records.
As at the end of June 2018, a total number of 486 MDAs have been enrolled on the IPIS, with over 330,820 employees being paid salaries through the IPIS platform. In fulfillment of one of the cardinal principles of the introduction of the IPIS program, which is blocking loopholes and discouraging corruption in the administration of personnel records, it is important that the human resource information on the IPIS portal be cleaned up with a view to having credible data for both payroll and personnel administration and analysis. The upcoming verification exercise is therefore to authenticate the documents of the individual employees of the federal government, and the procedure is that every employee will present themselves for screening and their documents scanned into the system. The employees to be verified are those that have completed their update on the online verification portal. Those who fail to carry out the online update are therefore excluded from this verification exercise. The consequence of non-compliance is having your data deleted from the federal government employee database.
The Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018 is adopting the apply and explain principle to promote the ease of doing business and attracting local and foreign investors into the country. The Executive Secretary, Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Reporting Council, announced this at a public hearing on the 2018 revised version of the code in Abuja today. He says it will help enhance the integrity of the Nigerian capital market. The public hearings on the 2018 code had previously been held in the Southeast, South-South, and Northeast zones of the country.
The Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria is a regulatory agency under the supervision of the Federal Ministry of Trade and Investment. It is also saddled with ensuring compliance to its set standards. The Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018, issued by the agency, is an upgrade from the now defunct 2016 code and seeks to block the gaps in the previous code to institutionalize the highest standards of corporate governance best practices in Nigerian companies.
It comprises of 7 parts or sections, as the case may be, and it has 28 principles of corporate governance ideals, and then 231 recommended governance best practices.
The Executive Secretary of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria spoke on the corporate governance journey and how the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018 differs from that of 2016.
The first is what you may refer to as the philosophy of the code. The previous code is what you may refer to as a rule-based mandatory code. The technical committee has recommended and the board of the FRC has accepted that we move towards what you call a principles-based code.
This is the first time Nigeria is adopting a minimum standard of behavior in the financial sector. Punitive measures for non-compliance will be by market-based incentives and sector regulators. And while compliance to the code is effective immediately for companies that choose to do so, reports on compliance will take effect from January of 2020.
Written in that manner. So
governments in Africa need to invest and place identification mechanisms in place to make it easier for buyers to know what and who they're buying from across the continent. The Group Chief Executive Officer of EcoBank Transnational Incorporated, Mr. Ade Ayeyemi, made this known while delivering the progress report on the Africa Forum, which was launched in Kigali 2017. He says the forum aims to make payments for goods and services across Africa more efficient and flexible enough to ensure payments across Africa in local currency and creating the trust required for efficient trade.
What is the key problems you're trying?
It was one of the sessions during the AfrExim annual meeting for 2018. One of the discussions centered on multiple currencies on the African continent and how this has impacted negatively on the growth of Africa's businesses.
The challenges of us being able to trade with each other has been inability to make payment. Make payment in the local currency that is available to people.
Africa has about 40 currencies. So anybody who wanted to buy something in another country has to first buy US dollars and then pay.
The discussion then moved to the Continental Free Trade Area and how this agreement can tackle unemployment and illegal migration on the African continent. Group CEO of EcoBank spoke on the Africa Forum launched by EcoBank in November of 2017 in Kigali and the platforms necessary for its implementation in Africa.
Each of the countries needs to start putting standards in place, standardization, so that it becomes easier for somebody in one country to be able to know what is buying from others.
The Africa Forum is all about people, creating a platform where trading across the continent can be done with local currencies. This will go a long way in tackling issues of illegal migration and unemployment across the continent. EcoBank believes policies such as this one will bring much needed help to a continent in desperate need for the growth and development of its people.
Let's delve into some more business news now. Here's Anne Wawodo.
You first. First Bank.
Thank you, Amarachi. Shell Petroleum Development Company has lifted force majeure on Nigeria's Bonny-Light crude oil exports after about 2 months. The local subsidiary of multinational oil giant Royal Dutch Shell had declared force majeure on May the 17th this year, following the shutdown of the Nembe Creek trunk line. The Nembe Creek trunk line is one of the 2 major pipelines used by SPDC and some other major producing companies to transport crude from the eastern Niger Delta to the Bonny export terminal. In the meantime, spot trade was very thin today as traders wait to see the size of September's loading programs, which is due next week. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo has advised African leaders to redouble their efforts towards trade facilitation. According to him, it will help create jobs for youths, reduce poverty, and provide income for its people. He was speaking at the session of the ongoing 25th Annual General Meeting of the African Export and Import Bank in Abuja. And let's check out the local stock market. Listed local equities have made a quick rebound at the close of today's trading on the NSE. Investors are taking advantage of the low-priced blue-chip stocks. BC Adebayo has more for us.
Hello and welcome to the stock market reports. Despite a negative market breadth of 24 decliners to 17 gainers, The main index of the NSE bounced back to winning ways on Friday with a 0.45% increase. The equities capitalization also recovered 60 billion naira as all major counters except the insurance sectors rallied. Traders attribute today's gains to bargain hunting by investors after the market recorded 3 consecutive days of downturn. However, in contrast to Thursday's session, total volume turnover reduced by 141 million units to a little over 200 million units traded in more than 3,000 transactions, driven by the shares of Access Bank, Dangote Sugar and Sovereign Trust Insurance. Meanwhile, Sovereign Trust Insurance is the day's top gainer, while its contemporary custodian leads 23 other decliners. And that's it on the stock market reports. I'm BC Adebayo.
Thank you, BC. And as for major world stock markets, they have also ended the day mostly higher or better than expected corporate earnings result from Wall Street as investors shift attention to U.S. and China's trade conflict. Let's see the numbers for today. Thank you for watching Business News on the last trading day of the week. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm Anne Nwawadu. It's back to you, Marachi.
You first. First Bank.
Leaders and elders of the Niger Delta region want the federal government to include more beneficiaries to the presidential amnesty program by making a proclamation. The unanimous voice formed part of the resolutions reached at a stakeholders meeting hosted by the coordinator of the Presidential Amnesty Program, Professor Charles Dokubo. Our correspondent, Olu Phillips, reports.
When amnesty was granted to ex-agitators in the height of militancy by the previous administration, that offer had 4 components. First is the disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, ownership of petroleum assets by host community, the infrastructural development component, and the environmental remediation component. How all of these have fared and could be improved upon forms the crust of this meeting of critical stakeholders from the Niger Delta region and convened by the coordinator of the Presidential Amnesty Program, Professor Charles Dokubo. As soon as guests settled in, he steps up to the podium to state his intentions and proposals for moving the region forward whilst he is at the helms of affairs.
We are now in the process of activating various vocational centers in the Niger Delta that has been built but have not been activated. The critical issue that I'm dealing with is how do you train, retrain, empower our citizens that have gone through the various processes of DDR so that they could also be men again or women again and help our communities that has been spoiled by war, destroyed by conflict. That is the side that I'm going to deal with now.
It's his first meeting with stakeholders since assuming office, with no holds-barred discussions expected, so they went into closed doors, but we caught up with some participants on their thoughts and expectations.
What concerns us really now is winding up the phase 1 and then carrying out remediation in the area. The whole place is polluted. You cannot fish in the creeks now. And oil spillages are still taking place, and nobody seems to address the problem. The pipelines are all old, have been in the salty environment for over 40 years, and nobody is replacing them.
Amnesty is not the solution to the Niger Delta issue. The solution to the Niger Delta issue is justice and equity. Restructure this country.
They should talk about integrating not just the militants or those who carried guns and dropped their guns, but also a situation that they will discourage all other young men from joining the bandwagon.
The meeting rose with some resolutions. The group urged the federal government to release funds allocated to the Presidential Amnesty Program promptly. The training programs for beneficiaries of the Amnesty Program should be revised to make them more employable. There's also the call on the federal government to expedite action on environmental remediation, infrastructural growth, amongst others. The coordinator has promised that this exercise will be a constant engagement. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
Still ahead of the news at 10, Football World Governing Body FIFA threatens to ban Nigeria after it recognizes Amaju Pinnick as duly elected president of the Nigeria Football Federation. That's on Sports News. Stay with us.